What if the things that you think are your limitations, the constant self-doubt, the difficulty trusting others, and the feeling of being trapped in old patterns, aren't limitations at all? What if there were actually brilliant solutions you created to navigate challenging circumstances? What happens if you could shift your perspective and see these patterns from an entirely new angle? Today we're going to consider where these patterns truly come from and how this shift can transform your relationships and your entire life. Hi, my name is Anna from Flow and Purpose, and welcome to my channel. Now, likely you've heard the terms narcissism and codependency, and these are often presented as two opposite poles on a spectrum, with one person being narcissistic and the other being codependent. And while these terms can be helpful in some ways, they often oversimplify and miss a crucial layer of understanding. The problem with this polarity is that it focuses on surface behavior rather than the underlying emotional and developmental roots. And it often labels people rather than understanding what is happening in terms of survival strategies that these people have developed. So from this broader perspective that we're exploring today, these behaviors are seen as manifestations of unmet developmental needs and the resulting survival strategies that we have adopted. They're not fixed personality traits, but more adaptive responses to early experiences that we've had. So instead of labeling someone a narcissist, we might see them as operating from a pride-based identification, which masks the deep shame and vulnerability that's underneath. And instead of labeling someone a codependent, we might see someone operating from a shame-based identification, which seeks validation and connection to compensate for the unmet needs that you've experienced as a child in these areas. So this deeper perspective allows us to move beyond the simplistic labels and to understand these underlying dynamics better. And it allows us to see how narcissists and codependents, if we must use labels, are operating from the same core wounds, only expressing in different ways. So as children, we have fundamental needs: to feel connected, understood, safe, and free to be ourselves. And when these core needs are not met, we develop a coping strategy, a survival mechanism. And this plays out in various ways. So the earliest need that we have is for connection. And for connection to develop, we have to have had an experience of connection from our caregivers. And if this has been compromised at a very early age, from before birth until about 6 months of age, what happens is that we learn to disconnect. Feeling a sense of connection is actually what we most desire, but at the same time, it is also what we most fear. So in that situation, we're kind of in a double bind. And in order not to feel the pain of this, we learn to disconnect from our body, we learn to disconnect from our emotions, and we learn to disconnect from others. And at the very extreme of that, it can manifest as dissociation, and perhaps in a less intense form, we can experience ourselves as invisible, and we could also try to be invisible for others. The second important need that we have as children is to be attuned to. And in the caregiving that we receive, if attunement is missing or if attunement is not consistently available, but only sometimes, what happens is that we learn to reject our core needs and also to reject the ability to communicate our needs. So what we do as a survival strategy is to focus only on the needs of others, because even knowing that we have needs is not something that we allow ourselves to do. A third core need that we have as children is for trust. And if in our development, trust has been mainly through our caretakers and our parents, if that need for trust is not developed and that our trust has been breached, what we learn is that we cannot trust the world, we cannot trust others. So most often the coping strategy that we develop out of that is that we try to control others, we try to control circumstances, and in that way we give expression to this underlying core belief that we have, is that we can only depend on ourselves and others are not to be trusted. We have a need for our own autonomy, and in order to develop our own autonomy, we need to be supported in that by our caregivers. And if that does not happen, how we end up adapting is that we put our own needs of self-expression and self-determination in a way on the back burner. So we prioritize what is important in the eyes of our caregivers, what we end up doing, what is expected of us, and we almost lose that sense of self-reference. So we abandon our independence, we abandon our authenticity in the first instance without even being aware of it. But once we're aware of it, it may even feel difficult to know what it is exactly that we want, because we have never been used to operating in that way. We've never used to be validated for being in touch with our authentic self-expression. And finally, we have the need for love as children. We need to feel love and to feel loved and to express our love, and that all in a safe environment. And if that is threatened, we will disconnect. We will not be able to safely express or receive love. We will not be able to bring our heart into relationship. So our interpersonal relationships will suffer, and we develop coping mechanisms such as perfectionism, and the perfectionism can express in any of a number of areas, whether it's to do with looks or with academic performance or sporting performance, or in any other way that we try to win the love in the first instance of our parents or caregivers, but as a coping mechanism that gets internalized and gets applied to all other relationships later in life. So if you find yourself perfectionistic, this could be where the origins of it lie. So I hope that you have got some insights from these underlying core needs from our childhood that we have had our whole life, that we have learned, if they've not been fully met or they've not been met during our childhood, to develop what was at the time very functional responses in order to cope with these circumstances. And unfortunately, these functional responses, although they've served us in the past, are not currently serving us. Nothing is fixed. These are all patterns that we can bring awareness to. We can bring awareness as they happen in the present moment and work with the sensations in our body and the emotions that arise, to bring light to these underlying patterns, to recognize them and hold them with compassion so that they can dissolve. So by understanding the roots of these patterns, we can begin to create a more fulfilling and authentic lives. If you'd like to learn more about how this affects your emotions, please watch this next video, and I look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you for watching.